Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something I think pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah.
This idea that, the real power struggle that we're facing isn't necessarily, just this simple left versus right
Right.
binary that we always
Yeah.
hear about, but it's something much deeper.
Yeah.
And, you've sent us some fascinating material
Down
that
there.
suggests there's this growing imbalance
Right.
between the ruling class and, well, the rest of us.
Yeah, that's right. And it even questions, could this imbalance be leading us towards a new type of slavery?
Oh, wow.
Not like the, chains and plantations kind of,
Right.
but
Yeah.
a more subtle like state slavery, where
Mhm.
that control comes through things like constant surveillance
Right.
or limitations on free speech.
Yeah.
So we'll be examining that and also kind of the psychology behind it,
Okay.
using insights from thinkers like Carl Jung and Frederick Douglass
Okay.
and modern research on power dynamics as well.
Wow, state slavery. That's
Yeah,
heavy stuff.
it is.
But I guess before we get there,
Mhm.
maybe we should start with the basics.
Yeah, good point.
What exactly is power?
Right.
Beyond just like telling people what to do.
Well, philosopher Bertrand Russell actually had a great definition for this.
Okay.
He said that power is simply the production of intended effects. It's about influencing outcomes,
Yeah, right.
shaping your world,
Okay.
even in small ways.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing then.
No, not at all. Think about it.
Okay.
You need some degree of power to make choices in your life,
Right.
to have healthy relationships,
Makes sense.
even just to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
In fact, psychologist Susan Fiske has shown that a healthy sense of power
Okay.
is actually crucial for our well-being.
Interesting.
We need it to fulfill
Yeah.
basic needs like
Yeah.
belonging and self-worth.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like without some power, you can't really be
Right.
your true self or even connect with others authentically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to see how power can go wrong,
Yeah.
I think we need to look at history.
Okay.
And there's no starker example of powerlessness than slavery.
Right, because slavery is like the ultimate loss of control over your own life.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
He had such a powerful voice on this.
Absolutely. Douglass, who escaped slavery himself,
Right.
defined it as being completely powerless to decide your own destiny.
Wow.
He even said, "A man without force is without the essential dignity of humanity." It's a stark reminder
Yeah.
of how vital a sense of agency is to our very being.
Yeah, that really hits hard. It's like our ability to shape our lives, even in small ways, is part of what makes us human.
Yeah, and it's not just an American issue.
Right?
Sociologist Orlando Patterson found that slavery's been around for centuries, impacting almost every culture in the world at some point.
That's crazy.
It's a tragically recurring pattern.
So this power struggle between the rulers and the ruled has been going on for a long time then.
Yeah.
Which brings us to, I think, this unsettling question.
Yeah.
Could we be heading toward a new form of slavery
Right.
even today?
That's the argument we're exploring.
Okay.
The idea is that even though chattel slavery is abolished
Right.
in most of the world,
Yeah.
we might be shifting towards what's called state slavery.
Okay.
This happens when the government gets so much control over our lives that we essentially lose our freedom to choose our own path.
Okay, so what would that actually look like?
So imagine restrictions on your movement
Yeah.
being constantly watched, limits on what you can say, and heavy taxes funding the whole system of control. Basically, the state takes away your power to make decisions about your own life.
It's interesting because, some people argue that we got a taste of this during the COVID pandemic with
Right.
lockdowns and mandates and all that.
That's a really valid point.
Yeah.
Those times definitely raised questions
Sure.
about the balance of power between individuals and the government, didn't they?
They did.
Yeah.
So if this state slavery is a real possibility, what's pushing us in that direction?
Well, the source material points to some fascinating psychological factors,
Okay.
both in those who rule and those being ruled.
Mm-hmm.
This is where Carl Jung's ideas become really relevant.
Okay. Here's where things get juicy.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this inflation thing.
So think of it like an ego that's gotten way too big, blown out of proportion.
Okay.
It's when people identify with power that doesn't really belong to them,
Okay.
like, getting a promotion and suddenly thinking they're better than everyone else.
Yeah, so it's like getting a big head just because of your title?
Exactly. They start to think they're above the rules.
Gotcha.
Like they are the institution itself. Jung actually used King Louis XIV of France as an example. The one who famously said, I am the state.
Wow, talk about an inflated ego.
Right.
But how does this psychological inflation in the ruling class affect the dynamic between them and everyone else?
Well, according to Jung, this inflated sense of self often leads to projection.
Okay.
Where we dump our own hidden weaknesses onto other people. You've probably experienced this yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're stressed at work and you snap at your family.
Oh, for sure.
You're projecting your frustration onto them.
Yeah. I've definitely been guilty of that.
It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the ruling class, they project their own insecurities and flaws onto the people they rule.
Right.
Instead of owning up to them.
So instead of acknowledging their own shortcomings, they blame the people.
Right.
They're supposed to be leading.
Think about the American slaveholders.
Yeah.
Who believed they were actually doing enslaved people a favor by taking care of them.
Wow.
That was a way to justify their power and control while ignoring their own ethical failings.
That's a chilling example.
Yeah.
It shows how twisted things can get when those in power let their egos run wild.
It really does.
But you mentioned there's another side to this. What happens psychologically to the people being ruled?
That's right. While the ruling class might be experiencing inflation, the people they govern might actually be experiencing the opposite.
Yeah.
Psychological deflation.
Deflation.
Yeah.
So instead of getting puffed up, they're shrinking.
Exactly.
Right.
Psychological deflation happens when we downplay our own potential and power.
Okay.
Like we get so used to following the rules and keeping our heads down that we forget we even have the power to make our own choices. We shrink ourselves to fit into the box society gives us.
So in a world of increasing control, being a good citizen might actually mean becoming more passive and less powerful.
Yeah.
That's a scary thought.
It is. And it leads to another layer of this power dynamic, which we'll explore after a quick break.
All right, sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about how the ruling class might inflate themselves psychologically, while the rest of us actually deflate ourselves.
Right.
And you were about to explain how this creates kind of dangerous feedback loop.
Exactly. You see, when we experience this deflation, we start pushing away parts of ourselves that we think don't fit into our limited roles. And one of the things we push away is our own need for power. Our desire to make things happen.
So it's like we're saying, I don't need power.
Right.
They need it. I'm just happy to go along.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. Those needs don't just disappear.
Right.
They get buried and then projected onto others, especially those in positions of authority.
Wait, so we're actually giving those in power even more power by projecting our own onto them?
That's exactly what's happened.
Whoa.
And remember, the ruling class is often already experiencing inflation.
Right.
So when we project our need for power onto them,
it
just reinforces their sense of superiority and control.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It is.
The more we shrink ourselves, the bigger they get.
And the more they inflate, the more we feel like we need to comply and follow their lead. It's a recipe for a very unhealthy power dynamic.
Right.
Psychologist Marie-Louise von Franz summed it up perfectly when she said, "It's much easier to admire a great personality than to follow your own star. We'd rather project our power onto external figures than cultivate it within ourselves."
This is all pretty bleak.
Yeah.
Is there any way to break out of this feedback loop?
There's always hope.
Okay.
The key is to recognize this pattern and make a conscious choice to reclaim our personal power.
Okay, that sounds great, but how do we actually do that? What are some practical steps we can take to reclaim our sense of power?
It starts by remembering that power isn't inherently bad.
Okay.
It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
Right.
We need to shift our perspective and see personal power as essential for shaping our lives and achieving our goals.
So instead of fearing power, we need to embrace it.
Exactly.
As something positive.
And then we need to take action.
Okay, so what does that look like?
This can look like so many different things.
Okay.
Learning new skills, setting boundaries in our relationships, strengthening our mental and physical well-being.
Right.
Finding role models who inspire us.
Okay.
Even small acts of asserting our preferences and making choices for ourselves can be incredibly powerful.
So it's about building our competence, our confidence, and our sense of agency.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our ability to make choices
Okay.
and take action in our own lives.
Yeah.
And the more individuals do this, the less fuel there is for that feedback loop.
That's encouraging.
Oh.
But it seems like a long process.
It can be.
Is there anything else we can do in the meantime? While we're working on building our personal power.
Interestingly, the source material highlights another unexpected tool for challenging authority.
What's that? Humor. Humor. You mean like laughing at our problems?
Not exactly. It's more about using humor and ridicule to expose the flaws and vulnerabilities of those in power who are trying to control us.
Right.
Tyrants and authoritarians want to be feared and respected,
Yeah.
not laughed at.
I can see that humor can definitely deflate a big ego.
Yeah.
And make those in power seem less intimidating.
Precisely, Juice Mirlo, who studied psychological warfare, argued that humor helps us see through the lies and manipulations of those who want to control us.
Interesting.
He said we need to treat the demagogue and aspirin dictator with the weapon of ridicule.
So meme satire, even good-natured teasing, can actually be a form of resistance.
Absolutely. It's about refusing to be ruled by fear and using humor to expose the absurdity of those who try to control us.
That's a really fascinating perspective. It makes you realize that laughter can be a powerful tool for social change.
It absolutely can. And remember, humor is also a sign of resilience. It shows that we're not going to let them break us.
This whole deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It has.
We've explored this potential slide towards state slavery, the psychological dynamics at play, and even some strategies for pushing back against it. What a journey.
It is a complex issue with deep roots.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is clear. The power dynamic between the rulers and the ruled isn't fixed. It's something we can influence through our choices and actions, even in seemingly small ways.
So to our listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we'd love to leave you with one final question to ponder. If this idea of state slavery is a path we could be heading down, what steps can you take starting today to move in the opposite direction?
What small act of rebellion, of self-empowerment can you commit to?
It could be something as simple as learning a new skill, talking about these ideas with a friend, or choosing to support a local business instead of a big corporation.
Exactly.
Remember, the power to shape the future truly lies within each of us.
It does.
Choose to reclaim it.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive. Until next time.
You know, after that last segment, I'm actually feeling a little more optimistic. It's easy to get overwhelmed by these big ideas about power and control. But it's actually really empowering to remember that we're not powerless as individuals.
That's a great point. It's easy to feel small when we only focus on like these massive institutions and systems. But like we've been discussing, real change begins with individuals. Recognizing their inherent power and choosing to use it.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. Might sound cliche, but it really applies here, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And remember, cultivating personal power isn't about making some like grand sweeping gesture. It's about the everyday choices we make, those small acts of defiance that can gradually shift the balance.
So like speaking up when something feels wrong.
Exactly.
Setting healthy boundaries in our relationships. Pursuing a creative passion that brings us joy. Or even just choosing to spend our time and money in ways that align with our values.
Exactly. Each time we make a choice that reflects our authentic selves, we chip away at that feeling of powerlessness. Both within ourselves and in the world around us.
And the coolest thing is that kind of energy is contagious. When one person starts to like stand up and reclaim their power, it can inspire others to do the same. It creates a ripple effect.
It really does. And that's where the true hope lies. The more individuals who embrace their own power, the less effective those top-down controlling structures become. Because ultimately they depend on our passivity. Our willingness to go along, when enough of us withdraw that consent, the whole dynamic starts to shift.
This has been such a thought-provoking journey.
It has.
We started by exploring this unsettling idea of state slavery. Then delved into the psychology that might be driving it. And ended up with some really practical, even inspiring strategies for pushing back.
It's been fascinating to unpack all of this together.
It has.
And it all comes back to that core idea. The future isn't preordained. It's shaped by the choices we make, both individually and as a society.
Yeah.
The more we cultivate our own sense of power,
Right.
the more influence we have over the direction we're heading.
So, listener, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If this possibility of state slavery is a path we're on,
right,
what steps can you take starting today to steer us in a different direction?
What one small act of rebellion, of self-empowerment, can you commit to?
It could be as simple as learning a new skill, having a conversation about these ideas with a friend.
Right.
Or choosing to support a local business over a faceless corporation.
Absolutely.
Every act of conscious choice matters.
It really does.
Remember, the power to shape the future truly lies within each of us.
It does.
Choose to reclaim it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.